The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you. Or wonders they say shall never cease to happen. Imagine waking up one morning and finding out your country is now a quarantine zone for a deadly virus. Not because your people have the virus, not because your hospitals are treating local patients, but because your government made a secret deal with a foreign superpower. This is exactly what just happened in Kenya. And it shows a sad, disturbing truth. To the powerful leaders of the world, African lives are still not treated as equal. Right now, there is a dangerous Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This strain is rare and very scary because the usual vaccines and treatments do not work against it. Americans saw this and got nervous. The United States government openly said their only priority is to protect American citizens. They made it clear they will not allow a single case of Ebola to enter the United States. That is their right as a country. But look at what they did next. Instead of taking their citizens back home to America to treat them, the US government made a secret deal with Kenyan President William Ruto. They quietly built a 50-bed isolation facility at a military air base in Kenya. The plan was simple. Any American worker exposed to Ebola in the Congo will be flown straight to Kenya. They will stay on Kenyan soil to be watched. If they stayed healthy, fine. If they got sick, they will be flown to Europe. But nobody goes back to America. Think about the logic here. Exposed Americans go to Africa, sick Americans go to Europe, but American soil must stay clean and safe. They decided that Kenya should absorb the dangerous risk that America refused to take home. They turned a sovereign African nation into a safety buffer for Western citizens. And the worst part, the Kenyan people knew nothing about it. There was no public announcement. There was no debate in parliament. The deal was signed in total secrecy. The facility was fully built and ready to open before a journalist finally exposed the truth.
The number one priority of our foreign policy is to protect the American people. We cannot and will not allow any cases of Ebola to enter the United States. And so the State Department and other agencies represented here, the Centers for Disease Control, HHS, others, are working very, very hard to contain this crisis to the countries where it's currently located, particularly the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so we've surged assistance to make sure that is being contained there. And obviously, multiple agencies involved here are also very involved in tracking people, just to make sure that nobody comes into this country that has Ebola and creates a problem for us. And we feel like we've got good efforts in place to do that, and Americans should feel assured that the President and his administration is doing everything we can to protect them on that front.
NTV has now established that Kenya entered into 2 agreements under a global health diplomacy program, agreements that allow emergency facilities such as Ebola centers to be established in the country. NTV has further learned that American health experts have already arrived in the country to set up an Ebola quarantine facility in Laikipia County, a facility expected to receive U.S. citizens exposed to the deadly virus. This comes even as President William Ruto held talks with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, with Washington pledging 1.7 billion shillings to support the program. And as NTV's Julius Juma reports, the High Court has now suspended the construction and operationalization of the facility amid growing resistance from Kenyans and medical professionals as well as leaders.
Facility is going to host people who are endangering my own life.
As Kenyans continued to debate the controversial US-backed Ebola quarantine facility last evening, President William Ruto, on the other hand, was having a phone conversation with the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. At the center of the talks were plans to establish an Ebola quarantine and isolation center in Kenya for American citizens exposed to the virus in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Following the discussions, the United States pledged 1.7 billion shillings to support Kenya's Ebola preparedness and response measures. The Donald Trump administration has also committed an additional 14.5 billion shillings toward regional Ebola containment efforts across the region as fears grow over the rapidly spreading outbreak in the DRC. As these developments unfold, NTV has established that Kenya entered two separate agreements under a broader global health diplomacy framework, agreements that permit the establishment of emergency health facilities such as Ebola centers within the country. The first agreement was signed in 2015 by former Health CS James Macharia, before former Health CS Mutahi Kagwe signed a 7-year extension in 2022. By signing a biosecurity agreement with the US on July 24, 2015, Kenya opened her doors to the setting up of research and isolation centers for diseases classified as biological threats. Then in December 2024, Kenya revised her foreign policy, particularly, and I quote, to promote Kenya as a wellness, humanitarian, and health emergencies medical hub. The foreign policy document, titled The Global Health Diplomacy and seen by NTV, became the foundation for the now controversial move to set up Ebola laboratories and isolation centers in Kenya. On December 4th, 2025, Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio signed the Kenya-U.S. Health Cooperation Framework in Washington, D.C. President William Ruto was present as a witness. NTV has further learned that American health experts and military-linked personnel have already arrived in the country to spearhead the establishment of the Ebola quarantine facility in Laikipia County. According to the terms of the 1.7 billion shilling arrangement, the facility is expected to host American nationals exposed to Ebola, with operations reportedly set to be supervised by the U.S. military personnel and managed by the American medical teams. This plan has, however, triggered sharp criticism from Kenyans. Leaders and residents of Laikipia County, where the facility is expected to be established, have also rejected the plan, raising fears over public safety, transparency, and the possible importation of Ebola into Kenya.
Ruto have started again. Something very controversial is happening in Kenya right now. The United States want to establish an Ebola quarantine facility in Kenya for Americans exposed to the virus in Central Africa. Now pause, because immediately one difficult conversation started spreading across Africa. If America has some of the most advanced hospitals in the world, why are Americans not being taken back to America? Think about that for a second. The same America with world-class infectious disease centers once exposed Americans quarantined on African soil. According to reports, the proposed facility would reportedly be staffed by American public health personnel. But Kenyans did not just quietly accept this conversation. Kenyan doctors pushed back hard. Their union threatened protest, questioning why Kenya should carry this kind of risk and whether the country was being asked to absorb a problem a superpower could manage itself. Then came an even bigger twist. A Kenyan judge has now suspended the plan after legal concerns were raised over public health risk and whether proper procedures had even been followed. Now, let me be very clear. There is no public evidence right now that this is some hidden geopolitical operation, but Africans would be wise to ask difficult questions early, because history has taught this continent something painful. Dependency rarely arrives looking dangerous. It arrives looking helpful. Aid, security cooperation, emergency support, infrastructure, partnerships. And years later, people suddenly realize influence quietly deepened. So maybe the bigger issue here is not even Ebola. Maybe it is this. When powerful countries make strategic decisions involving Africa, are Africans asking enough questions before temporary systems become permanent? Because history has shown us something uncomfortable. By the time people realize influence has expanded, the structures are already standing. Thank you all for watching this video.
And how are you? You know what clicked for me with this Ebola conversation? That it's not even just about Ebola. It's about sovereignty. It's about who is expected to carry the risk for whom. America is publicly saying that Ebola must stay away from their soil. That's okay, because we also want, as Kenyans, Ebola to stay away from our soil. And it also tells me that America understands exactly how serious Ebola is. So then explain to me, as if I'm a standard 2 kid, why is Kenya suddenly part of that conversation? The outbreak is in Congo. The citizens are American. The concern is American. The pressure is American. But somehow, Kenya gets into the WhatsApp group. How? This is when we start asking questions. This is one of the reasons that some of these foreign policy discussions start sounding like Africa is one giant administrative block instead of a continent made of several countries. Africa is not America. Africa is not 50 states under one federal government. No, Kenya is not an American territory. Congo isn't one either. Neither is Uganda. These are all independent countries with independent governments, with independent citizens, independent priorities, independent consequences to the things that they do. So you cannot mentally move through African countries the way you move between Texas and California. No. That shift of thinking is needed badly by Americans. And before somebody comes here and says, containment facility, understand what citizens are reacting to. Citizens of Africa, number one, are very educated. very educated. We know what we are talking about. And the people are not just looking at that quarantine room. Oh no, that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at you and going like, oh, but they're giving us money. There is bad money, and we understand that quite well. Africans, Kenyans, we are looking at the entire chain. We are looking at the transport, waste disposal, human error, procurement, corruption, training, corruption, staffing, enforcement, corruption, politics. Did I say corruption? Cover-ups? Yes. And one weak link is enough. And then there's another thing people are ignoring. The countries at the source of these outbreaks have experiences that others do not have. Congo has unfortunately had to fight Ebola repeatedly. And that's a tragedy, we get it, but it also means they've got experience. They know exactly how to do contact tracing. They know how to do isolation, outbreak management. They know how to handle bodies. You know, those procedures, they know them. They know the warning signs. They know the psychological realities of managing communities during such kind of outbreaks. And that experience matters. There is a learning curve with diseases like Ebola. And that's exactly what scares people about moving this Ebola everywhere, or elsewhere, as it were. Now, let's ask another question. Even if you believe containment works perfectly, why is Kenya in the transport chain at all? Let's think about the logistics. The outbreak is entered, hundreds and thousands of kilometers away, exaggeration, in northeastern Congo, right? To get a potentially exposed person in Kenya, you have to move them. You're talking about transferring them. You have to fly them. You have to land them. You have to move them again to where they're supposed to be going. You have to handle their baggage. You have to handle their equipment. You have to handle their waste. You have to handle their crews. You have to handle their support. Every additional transfer point creates another point of vulnerability. And that is what many people are struggling to understand, because America already has an aircraft capable of long-range medical evacuation. America already has specialized facilities. America has already biocontainment for expertise. America has got hospitals. America has got resources. So why is Kenya in the middle of this journey? If these citizens require treatment, monitoring, observation, protection, bring them home. And then there is history. Because history is what we use when we're doing risk assessments. Okay, people remember Iraq, we remember Afghanistan, we remember how nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands went. Yeah, well, there are so many people in communities around the world who are still debating accountability decades later. And whether one agrees with every criticism of America or not is besides the point, because the point is simple. History teaches smaller countries that when powerful countries make mistakes abroad, the local community will often carry those consequences long after global attention has moved on. And that history shapes trust. And trust shapes assessment, risk assessment. Now, brings another question. Why are we automatically assuming the burden created by American citizens must become someone else's responsibility? America has always taken pride in protecting its citizens. They rescue their citizens, they evacuate them all the time, recovering them from the worst of places. And there is this contract, whether it is in movies, in real life, in news, geopolitics, whatever. There is a social contract between the states and its people that is quite, we see it in action. So why is the responsibility suddenly, why does it become internationalized when consequences arrive? Shouldn't a country carry its own? Yeah, shouldn't America carry its own like it has always done? Because if America believes that their citizens deserve that care, then America should carry the responsibility that comes with providing that care. And when we arrive at accountability, people keep saying, if something goes wrong, then compensation will happen. Hooray, compensation. You people make me laugh.
The US government even cut its regular health funding to Kenya by over $400 million, gave back a smaller amount of money, attacked this dangerous virus facility to it, and called it a partnership. That is not a partnership. That is treating a country like a dumping ground. It is treating African land as a place to hide things that are too dangerous for people back home. Local doctors, lawyers, and regular citizens in Kenya exploded in anger. The head of the Kenyan Doctors Union said it perfectly. He said they will not sit back and watch Kenya be used as a containment colony for a deadly disease they did not create. Local residents are terrified that the virus could escape and stay in the local wildlife, creating a permanent danger for Kenyan families and children long after the foreigners leave. Thankfully, the Kenya High Court stepped in at the last second and blocked the facility from opening. The court showed what true sovereignty looks like. If America, with all the facilities, with everything, cannot send their people back home to be treated, is it on the soil of Africa? But this was the same William Ruto who stood firmly and told the whole world some few weeks ago in the presence of Emmanuel Macron that Africa will no longer allow itself to be exploited. So is it that the leaders will continue to be talking in speech and still act nothing? What kind of exploitation is it again? Is this not the same exploitation we have been receiving for all these years? Why must it be that our lives do not matter? The outbreak is not in Kenya, but the Kenyan soil will be used as a dumping ground to be treated. Why? For how long will we continue? And Kenyan government William Ruto will accept, put his own people's life at risk in this manner? Africa will have a long way to go. Sometimes when you look at what the leaders who preach Pan-Africanism, who talk, do after speaking, it's sad. Our lives matter. If they can't send their people back home to be treated, then it shouldn't be on the soil of Africa like the locals are crying for. They are protecting the lives of their people. The Americans have made it clear they will protect their citizens. So why can't you, William Ruto, also protect the citizens in Kenya? Are we to protect our citizens in speech? So what Julius Maada Bio, the ECOWAS chairperson, said is true, that you people protect borders instead of protecting the people. And for how long will you continue to protect these borders instead of protecting us? The people you said you are leading. Is everything all about democracy? Because the least chance you get, you always talk about democracy. Our lives matter. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall. And united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world, in Africa, East Africa, and in Kenya.